What if I told you that the very same policies that were supposed to spark a golden era for commercial real estate could actually be planting the seeds of its next major upheaval? That the promises of revitalization, booming demand, and record profits might be masking a far bigger risk lurking just underneath the surface. And unless you know how to read the signals behind the headlines, you might be sleepwalking straight into decisions that you'll regret for the next decade. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most investors, brokers, and developers are avoiding. The first 100 days of Trump's second term have created one of the most deceptive investment environments commercial real estate has ever seen. On the surface, deregulation, tax reform, infrastructure projects, it looks like the perfect setup. But underneath, a volatile stew of uncertainty, tariff shocks, federal office upheavals, immigration crackdowns, and reshuffling of debt markets. And if you don't understand how to navigate this chaos, it won't just cost you opportunities. It could trap you into liabilities you can't unwind, properties you can't lease, and investments that you can't sell. If you're wondering, I'm Cornell Dane. And for over 2 decades, I've been knee-deep in the trenches of commercial real estate, riding the highs, battling through the downturns, and watching fortunes made and lost, not by luck, but by pattern recognition. And today, I'm going to walk you through what's really happening behind the scenes of Trump's first 100 days, how it's setting up a massive fork in the road for commercial real estate, and more importantly, how you can position yourself not just to survive, but to come out way ahead of everyone else. Because once you see the full picture, you'll realize uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's your biggest weapon, if you know how to use it, that is. And if you're like many of my other customers and you're already managing serious capital or you're sitting on key decisions, I built a private briefing series just for you. 30 Days with Cornell, one tactical advantage a day straight from the deals that I work on. It's free, but it reads like intel. Link in the description. But before we can weaponize uncertainty, we have to dissect exactly how the last 100 days have reshaped the chessboard. And to understand that, let me paint a simple picture. Imagine you're steering a massive oil tanker. You've spent years plotting your course, nabbing out routes, fine-tuning your cargo and crew, and suddenly, without warning, the currents beneath you shift. At first, it feels like a slight wobble, nothing you can't correct for. But as you keep moving, you realize the tides aren't just shifting, they're reversing. And every degree you stay on your original course is now pulling you off of your destination by miles. That's the invisible danger commercial real estate players are facing right now. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, how good your assets are, how solid your fundamentals seem. You're going to miss your destination by a lot. So let's test something real quick. Are you basing your 2025, 2026 strategy on forecasts made before April of this year? Are you assuming that construction costs are going to stabilize soon? Are you treating government leases like gold standard tenants? Are you betting on easy debt markets returning by late 2025? If you answered yes to even one of these, you could be setting yourself up for a painful blindside. Unfortunately, that's before we even factor in the ripple effects still brewing. Let's get specific. Let's walk through the real forces Trump has unleashed one by one and show how each one could either crush or catapult your next commercial real estate move. And trust me, there are landmines buried in some of the most safe-looking deals you'll see this year. So first, the tariff shock. So on April 2nd, Trump declares Liberation Day and unleashes
145%
tariff bomb on Chinese imports. Within days, about 6 days actually, some of it is suspended, but the core damage, it's already done. Supply chains scramble, cost assumptions explode, industrial deals stall mid-pipeline. Companies like Blackstone, CBRE, and Prologis, the titans who almost never flinch, are now openly warning about deal slowdowns because of tariff uncertainty. Prologis didn't just slow down, they sliced their development pipeline by up to $1 billion. Now, pause and think about that. One of the savviest real estate developers in the world, with every incentive to push optimism publicly, pulling back because they can't predict the outcome. When the giants flinch, you better believe the tremors are real. And here's the kicker. Even if the tariffs get repealed tomorrow, the chilling effect on capital deployment, construction timelines, and price stability could last for years. In fact, the IMF already cut global growth projections by 40 basis points and U.S. projections by nearly a full point, half of it blamed directly on tariffs, which leads us to the first major pivot you need to make. If you're underwriting new projects, assuming stable material costs or construction timelines, you're not underwriting reality. You're underwriting nostalgia. But that's just the first current. Because while tariffs hit materials and supply chains, Trump's war on federal office leases is hitting commercial real estate debt markets where it hurts most. Day one, Trump signs an executive order banning telework for federal employees. A few weeks later, he enlists Elon Musk to lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, with a mission to slash budgets, cut jobs, and shrink government real estate. The result? Over 100,000 federal employees fired. Massive swaths of government office leases canceled or threatened. Federal tenants, once the gold standard of office leasing, are now viewed by lenders and underwriters as flight risks. Deals that used to appraise easily in a 5 cap now can't even get clean underwriting. And here's the paradox. Even rumors of DOGE's property cuts, not actual moves, just rumors, are enough to create evaluations and freeze lending decisions. Think about it. Would you lend at 70% LTV to a building where the anchor tenant could vanish in 6 months? Neither would I, and neither will your bank. This office implosion isn't just a DC problem, it's national. And the ripple effects are already showing up in CMBS portfolios, over $12 billion in debt exposure linked to these at-risk properties. This is the second macro current. Federal lease risk is now a hidden iceberg beneath every office deal. If you don't map it, if you're relying on old tenant credit assumptions, you're really sailing blind. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because it's not just federal office turmoil that's reshaping commercial real estate fundamentals. There's a third force at play, one that could gut your construction pipeline and your workforce at the same time: Trump's immigration crackdown. And what's happening here is even more underappreciated and potentially more dangerous. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a political story, but if you're in commercial real estate, especially construction, multifamily, or hospitality, this is a direct operational threat. And here's why. Within the first 50 days of his term, over 32,800 arrests were made under Trump's immigration directives. That's not a policy draft. That's boots on the ground enforcement. And when a quarter of your construction force is foreign born, legal or not, that enforcement doesn't just scare undocumented workers. It freezes entire crews. That means workers stop showing up. Subcontractors can't fill crews. Delivery drivers stopped taking the job. Huntington Estate Properties said their teams were even afraid to drive to pick up supplies, not because of guilt, but because of fear. A stop sign could mean deportation. So what does that do to your timelines? What does that do to your general contractor pricing, your labor availability, your leasing projections? You're not just fighting inflation anymore. You're fighting attrition from fear. And here's where this collides with the fourth macro current, which is the collapse and rebirth of capital inflow through immigration. So for years, developers used the EB-5 visa program like a hidden cheat code. Foreign investors front the cash for major projects. They get green cards. You get low-cost capital. Everyone wins. EB-5 visas helped fund icons like Hudson Yards in New York City and The Wharf in DC. But under Trump 2.0, that pipeline's about to get torched. The new plan? Replace EB-5 with the so-called Trump Gold Card, a program that boosts the minimum investment from $1 million to $5 million. Except there's no timeline, no guidelines, no functioning launch plan, just delays, contradictory statements, and deafening uncertainty. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, yes, the same Howard Lutnick who used to chair Newmark, has offered multiple deadlines that all missed. So if you were counting on EB-5 as a financing lever, you're in limbo. Your $50 million luxury tower just lost its anchor investor pool. And yet, here's the real kicker. These four currents, tariffs, federal leases, labor fear, and capital uncertainty, are just the surface level disruptions. What's scarier are the second order effects, because they don't just slow the market, they warp it. Let me explain. You see, when a policy hits one sector hard, capital doesn't disappear. It flows like water through a cracked dam. What we're seeing now is misaligned capital flow. Developers are pulling back on industrial, just as demand for reshoring and data centers is surging. Investors are abandoning government leased offices while missing distressed assets primed for repositioning. Lenders are tightening everywhere, but Blackstone and other sharks are preparing to feast if values dip just 10% more. It's not a freeze, it's more like a reshuffling. And if you know where the capital is about to go, not just where it's pulling out, you'd get a seat at the table others are too scared to approach. So let me show you how. Because everything we've covered so far, all the chaos and tension, leads to this. There is a pattern to how uncertainty creates fortunes. And if you want to build positioning while others are frozen, you need to master a new framework. And I call it the CRE Crisis Navigation System. It's built on 9 steps, each one tailored to exploit the exact vulnerabilities this market's producing. Let's walk through them. Step 1, decode the signal behind the shock. Every new policy has a headline and a hidden signal. Tariffs aren't just about China. They're a signal to manufacturers and AI infrastructure investors. Government layoffs aren't just downsizing. They're a signal to consolidate office footprints and reprice credit tenants. You must train yourself to look beneath the news cycle. Step 2, apply the capital freeze filter. Ask, who just got spooked? Who lost access to financing? Who can't move forward without clarity? Then pivot to where the capital hasn't yet adjusted, but will. Step 3, underwrite at paranoia levels. Assume interest rates stay flat or rise. Assume timelines extend by 20%. Assume lease-up velocity slows by 30%. Then underwrite. If your deal survives that, it'll thrive if any good news shows up. Step 4, reposition government-exposed assets. Don't fire sell your federal tenant buildings. Instead, explore multi-use repositioning or re-tenant with AI infrastructure firms, data logistics, or education pivots. There's a second act for government space, but you'll need to be the first to move. Step 5, target reshoring opportunities. Follow the tariff pain backward. Where will the companies move production to? Who benefits from anti-China supply chains? Think tier 2 metros with power, infrastructure, and logistics. That's where your industrial gold is hiding. Step 6, de-risk your labor dependencies. Use prefab where possible. Partner with vocational training programs. Incentivize stable workforce housing. Every day of labor interruption now bleeds cash. You got to understand that. Step 7, anticipate new capital vehicles. If EB5 is dying, what replaces it? Private placement, syndications, sovereign funds, family offices. The appetite is still there, but the access points have shifted. Step 8, monitor political theater as financial forecast. Trump's theater is not just noise. It's a pricing mechanism. Every executive order is a forward guidance move. So read it like a Fed statement, but with more volatility. And lastly, step 9, preload soft landing plays. If the market corrects but avoids full collapse, assets bought in fear will roar back. Position yourself now with cash, structure, and velocity so you can strike before the competitors unfreeze. Now, I gotta admit, that's a lot to process. But the point isn't just to give you a checklist. It's to train your mind to operate like a crisis opportunist. Because here's the thing nobody talks about enough. More wealth has been created in downturns than in booms. It's the people who see the panic, decode it, and then act before confidence returns who capture the steepest appreciation curves on the other side. Let's zoom out for a second. Picture a pendulum. It swings from optimism to fear and back. Most people wait until it's back at optimism to move, but by then, the returns are gone. The elite, well, they move when the pendulum is at its peak fear point, when nobody else can see forward. And right now, we are mid-swing, not full collapse, not full recovery, which means this is your window. But only if you stop following the playbook of 2022, because this isn't 2022 anymore. And if you're still using a 2022 mindset, hoping inflation settles quietly, hoping debt markets loosen up, hoping tenant stability returns without a fight, you're clinging to a world that doesn't exist anymore. It's like trying to sell a new ocean with an old map. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Cornell, but isn't this all just temporary noise? Won't things normalize after the election dust settles? Well, that's a fair question. So let's tackle it head on, because I get it. It's comforting to believe that. But history and reality say otherwise. Let's go back to Trump's first administration. Everyone thought the trade wars would be a temporary negotiating tactic. 5 years later, we were still operating under totally different global trade assumptions, ones that permanently altered supply chains, costs, and regional priorities. Or look at C-19 era remote work policies. Initially, everyone said it'll go back to normal. Now, half the office buildings in America are functionally obsolete. Point is, once structural shifts start, they don't normalize back to old equilibrium. They reset to a new equilibrium, and the winners are the ones who predict where it's settling. And right now, the early signs are flashing unmistakably. Manufacturing is deglobalizing. Office space is de-risking away from government dependence. Labor markets are fragmenting and hardening. Private capital is being forced to replace institutional sluggishness. And if you're waiting for 2022's conditions to come back, you're waiting for a train that left the station and isn't coming back. But here's the twist. If you accept that, if you lean into it, the opportunity set becomes bigger than it's been in years, because when old players cling to dead strategies, the field widens for those willing to adapt. And those who adapt first, they don't just survive, they dominate. So now that you understand the shifting tides, let's get even more tactical. I want to walk you through a real-world cautionary tale, a micro story you won't hear on Bloomberg or CNBC, but that explains everything. Early this year, a regional investment group based out of Dallas scooped up a Class A government-leased office building. On paper, it looked like a slam dunk. Federal agency as anchor tenant, long-term lease, high credit rent stream, discounted purchase price after pandemic pricing resets. They underwrote it based on all the old assumptions. Government equals sticky tenant. Lease renewal odds equal about 90+%. Cap rate compression equals inevitable. Except 2 weeks after they closed, the Doge's first hit list leaked. Guess who was on it? You guessed it, their tenant, their anchor. So within 60 days, the agency signaled they wouldn't renew and might terminate early. Now that property, it's toxic. Their lender reappraised it at 25% less than their original basis. And refi, it's not happening. They're either going to take a loss or feed cash into a sinking ship, all because they used an old map to navigate a new ocean. And that story, it's happening all over the country, not just Texas. Now you might be wondering, okay, Cornell, but what if Trump reverses course? What if some new policy offsets the risk? Great, you're thinking like an investor. But let's address that objection too, because yes, possibility of reversal always exists, but probability is really what matters. And with Trump doubling down, pushing even harder on tariffs, immigration, and federal cuts, the probability of a rapid reversal is very slim. In fact, the momentum is accelerating. Amazon, Meta, Tesla, Honda, all of them are already retooling their supply chains for a new world. Not waiting, moving. You should be too. And now that you understand the dangers of staying tied to the old playbook, you're probably asking yourself, where exactly are the smart moves hiding? Where should I focus while others panic? That's exactly where we're headed next, because I want to reveal something almost nobody's talking about yet. The 3 commercial real estate power plays hidden inside Trump's chaos. Think of it as your blueprint, not just to survive, but profit massively while everyone else freezes. So are you ready? Well, let's get into it. So power play number 1, I call that industrial infrastructure symbiosis. Remember those tariffs everyone's screaming about? Well, they're not just about punishing China. They're about re-engineering American industrial capacity. And the data center boom we're about to see, it's not just an AI trend, it's a national security initiative now. The day after inauguration, Trump stood with OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank announcing Stargate, a $500 billion data center mega campus in Texas. Amazon, Google, Apple, all in. Which means the smart move isn't just buying warehouse space randomly, it's targeting locations symbiotic with industrial infrastructure investments, fiber lines, logistics hubs, energy corridors. Where energy meets AI meets manufacturing, That's the next gold rush. If you know where the nodes are being built, you can buy land, flex space, and supporting assets before the feeding frenzy starts. Okay, but what if you think industrial is already overpriced? It's true. Some industrial markets are overpriced, but the infrastructure adjacent sites, they're still massively undervalued relative to their future role, because when data needs a home, it needs power, cooling, logistics access, and scalable land. You can't fake that with suburban spec buildings. Which brings us to power play number 2. Call that the zombie office resurrection. Not all offices are doomed. In fact, the collapse of government-leased offices is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to reposition prime assets into new growth sectors. So we go from government abandoned to private cybersecurity firms moving in. Or we go from a federal lease exit to AI startups needing hybrid space. CMBS office default? Maybe that moves into family office conversion into specialty use. The smartest players right now are quietly buying government-impacted buildings at discounts, then repositioning them before the narrative flips. It's not about betting on return to office. What it is about is betting on new tenants, new uses, and new incentive structures. That brings us lastly to power play number 3, labor-resilient development strategies. The immigration crackdown will starve conventional builders, but it will supercharge anyone who can control labor differently. Strategies like prefab modular construction, developer-run vocational programs, automation of simple build processes. If you integrate labor stabilization into your pipeline, you will win when others delay. Simple rule: control the crews, control the projects, especially when labor markets fracture under political pressure. Now that you can see the 3 major power plays unfolding beneath the chaos, the real question becomes, will you be a spectator to this transformation? Or will you position yourself inside the transformation while the majority are still busy debating headlines? Because here's a little secret about market cycles that very few talk about. The winners aren't decided after the chaos. The winners are decided during the chaos. But their victories don't become obvious until much, much later. They make the moves now, quietly, strategically, while everyone else is paralyzed by uncertainty. And by the time the crowd realizes what happened, it's already too late to catch up. So, if you want to start positioning early, if you want frameworks, market intelligence, strategies tailored to this exact unfolding chaos, I invite you to book a 30-minute strategy call with me. No hard sales, no pressure, just a real conversation about your goals, your portfolio, and how to apply these emerging opportunities before they become crowded. So if you're serious about staying ahead of this new commercial real estate environment, just check the link below and book your call. I think you'll be glad you did it when you look back 6 months from now. Okay, let's put it all together. All right, now that we've mapped out the structural shifts and identified the early power plays hidden inside the chaos, there's still one more dimension that we need to explore before we can fully capitalize on this environment. And that's timing. Because even if you know what to do, doing it at the wrong time can still wreck your returns. So let's decode that next. Think of the market like a forest fire aftermath. Immediately after the fire, the ground looks dead, burnt, hopeless, but below the surface, the seeds are already germinating. If you plant before the first green shoots emerge, when everyone else thinks they're still dead, you lock in uncontested territory. If you wait until the green shoots are visible to the naked eye, you're competing with everyone else who finally woke up. So right now, commercial real estate is still in that scorched earth phase. The average investor sees tariffs, layoffs, inflation warnings, recession fears. They don't see the foundations being laid. $500 billion data center projects, manufacturing reshoring, de-risking from Chinese imports, AI infrastructure expansions. And if you act now, before the narrative flips, you capture assets, land positions, and strategic plays before prices reflect the new reality. This is exactly what the Blackstones and the Brookfields of the world are preparing for. You can either follow in their footsteps after they've moved, or move with them quietly, strategically, and ahead of the curve. Imagine 6 months from now, you're sitting at your desk, reviewing your portfolio, but instead of watching deals slip away, you're locking in equity gains. Instead of chasing overpriced assets, you're fielding off-market offers for properties you picked up when others were frozen. Instead of wondering how to survive another chaotic year, you're thriving because you mastered it. You're not reactive. You're proactive. You're not hoping for conditions to improve. You're engineering your own improvement regardless of conditions. That's not a fantasy. It's the direct consequence of seeing what others miss and moving before they can. And today, you already see it. You're already ahead of 90% of the market just by knowing how to decode the chaos instead of being crushed by it. Now, let's make sure you stay ahead. So in the next video, we're going to go even deeper, because once you know where the opportunities are, the next level is mastering how to structure deals that survive uncertainty. More specifically, how to structure debt and equity in a way that neutralizes risk, how to negotiate terms that bake flexibility into your contracts, how to partner with capital sources that actually thrive during the reshuffle. Think of today as setting your compass. The next video will put tools in your hands to actually build with, fast, lean, and resilient. If you thought today's insights gave you an edge, wait until you learn about how to weaponize your next acquisition strategy against market chaos. So make sure you don't miss it. Hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and if you're serious about accelerating your moves, book that strategy call linked below, because the chaos isn't over. It's just getting interesting. And the best positions, they'll belong to those who move while others watch. I'll see you on the next one.